Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the pleasure to welcome Mr. Michael Tyler. Mr. Michael Tyler, he is a master djembe player, a teacher at Old Town Fox Music, adjunct professor at DePaul University. He's also a writer and author of the book Remembering Your Ancestral Fire. Mr. Tyler, thank you very much for joining me on the Human Rights Tree.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
I'm inviting you. Our conversation is under the umbrella art and activism.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Many people see you during event around the Chicago area, and often when we see you with your djembe.
Mm-hmm.
But for the people who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit who is Tyler?
A little bit. Who is Taylor? Okay. Um, Taylor is a biracial person who grew up in the United States, who loves cats and all animals. um, I'm a person who's had many interests throughout my life, and in 1994, something happened in my life that brought me to the djembe, and that changed everything. My entire focus of reality changed.
So, are you from Chicago? Were you born in Chicago?
I was born in Evanston officially.
Okay.
I'm an adopted person. I was adopted at birth, and the hospital I was born in was in Evanston. My adopted family lived in Chicago at the time. So I spent my first 6 years of, or 6 years of life, 5, 6 years of life in Chicago on the south side, 8843 South Blackstone, on the south side. And then because of my shade, me being so light skinned, I was in physical danger being in that part of Chicago at that time in history. There were kids who were light skinned like me getting beat up that were older than me like every day. So my mom saw this and she took us out to what was then the country, Downers Grove. Right now, Downers Grove is a random suburb, but back then in the 70s, like 1972, we moved there. That was very much the country. And I went out there, and I was the only non white kid in the whole school. And, and most of the kids were cool with me. A few of them, actually, seeing that I had an afro, they were racist toward me. So, at least I wasn't getting beat up. So it was it was a step up.
So, being a bit biracial, what are your background on that level? Are you biracial based on race or?
Right.
Mm,
Uh, my biological father is a black man. My biological mother is a white woman.
mm,
And I know that she is from British and German uh, descendants, but I didn't know anything about him. He died before I got to know him. Um, at the age of 30, so about 20, 25, 26 years ago, I started getting to know my biological family.
mm.
And by that time, my biological father had passed. So I never knew him. And anything known, on the adoption papers, it didn't specify anything about what his background was culturally. Now I can say that about 5 years ago, I did a one of those 23andMe DNA tests,
Mm.
and it showed that my mother was French, German, and British background, and it showed that the black side, my father's side, was from West Africa, and a lot of the areas like Senegambia, Gambia, Nigeria, Guinea, so areas that touch where the Malian Empire was definitely, and that's of course where the djembe arose from. in the 12th century.
I see. So how was it growing up in Chicago as a young man?
As a young man, well, I grew up in, again, I was in Chicago from 0 to 6 years old. Then my mother moved us out of Chicago into the country, and
Mhm.
then that was 6 years old to 18 when I graduated high school. How was that? There were a few racists in my school, in each school that I was in, and they were keen on being racist towards me. But otherwise, the folks were cool toward me, but I knew that I was a little bit different, and that's the kind of thing where I was always kind of set on my own path. I didn't really have many examples of how to be, or I learned later that it's important to kids a lot of times to see someone like them in positions of authority or positions of leadership or positions of success. Like, I can see that person kind of looks like me and they're being successful, so that helps me to understand that I can be successful. You know,
Mm.
I learned about this way into my adulthood, and then realized I didn't ever have that. I never even thought about that.
I see.
I was on
Yeah.
my own trip, and that's and I can't say that I missed that, because I didn't know anything about what to do, about how to navigate as a white person, as a non-white person. But I was just going through life and just being happy as much as I could, and just keep on going forward. School was cool to me. I was reasonably, I was good in school, so that helped. I was good as an athlete. That helped. I had some musical talent that I early had some piano lessons, but didn't follow up with them. So things went pretty smooth as in growing up in Downers Grove.
So as an adoptive child, how was the relationship between you and your parents?
Me and my family.
Yeah.
Okay, my adopted family. I was adopted because I have a sister. She's 6 years older than me, and she's a natural child of my adopted family. So during her birth, there was actually a boy and a girl, and the boy didn't make it. So when I was adopted 6 years earlier, they were kind of still, um, they wanted to have a boy. They always wanted to have a boy. And when I was adopted, it was in the mid 60s, 1966, 1967. I think the process probably began in 1965, but they, the way that they did adoptions back then, they would really try to match types with types. So my adoptive family is very mixed racially, even more than I am. They're not just black and white. They're black and white and Native American and Lithuanian, and I don't even know what my father's adopted father's side was, but he was a dark skinned man with straight hair. You know how Eastern Indians have that dark skin and they have straight hair?
Yes.
I guess he had some Eastern Indian in him because he was just like that. But they adopted me, and my mother really, I was very, very, very special to her. Like, she wouldn't let anybody touch me for the longest time. She held me. I mean, did she hold me on a pedestal? I think so. I think that I later in life began to learn how much I meant to her, especially because she had the problem at birth where her son died. You know, so I was not only a person that she wanted in her life, but I was kind of, I think some of the energy of what had happened before was in. I think she brought that to the table with me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know,
That makes
and
sense.
after my mother died, after my adoptive mother died, if I say my mother, that I mean my adoptive mother. If I
Yes.
mean my biological mother, I usually say my biological mother. Um, when my mother died, her sister talked about things about me at her eulogy that I had never known. stuff about how incredibly important I was to her, and all of this stuff. And I didn't know. I guess I felt it, but I had never heard it said out loud until that moment.
So I'm guessing you went through school, and were you able to finish school, and what was your major?
Good question. So after high school, I was in theater in high school. Loved theater. I was also into the advanced maths and sciences in high school as well. Um, so when I graduated high school, I got accepted into university on a pre med school chemistry track, and that's how I got accepted to college. But I took a double major in theater and in chemistry, which there's let's just say I learned very quickly that that's not, no, too much, too much, too much, too much. So the theater thing went, it I gave up the theater major, and then eventually had to give up the chemistry major too because it was just crushing me. And what I learned something real important because in my chemistry major, um, up to that point in life, I would take the more difficult course that was more hard because I thought it was more worthwhile. Even if I got a lower grade, if it was difficult, that meant it was good for you. That meant it was, maybe stronger for you or something. And then there was
Stimulate your brain.
maybe something like that,
Yeah.
So, but I remember it was organic chemistry, it was sophomore year, and we had a test, and me and my group of friends that I'd study with, let's say there were five of us. Well, four of us got a score that was less than 30 or 35 points. Like, we're good students. And I had never gotten a test score that was like so low in my life. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I didn't know they could score that low. So anyway, but one of my friends, he like had got a 95 or something ridiculous like that. And I'm like, bro, I hang out with you. I study with you. What is it you're doing differently than we are all doing? And he said a thing that changed my life. He goes, I don't know, I just get it. And I was like, okay, thank you. Because now I'm going to go find out where I'm saying I just get it. And I might not know exactly where that is at this very moment, but I know it's not in this organic chemistry class.
I see.
so I went, and I was in speech team in addition to theater in high school. So public speaking and acting and that kind of thing, that's natural for me. And so I took a communications major. And it's the first time in my life I embraced something where I did it because it was something that was easy for me, and I
Yeah,
didn't avoid it because it was easy for me, because my psychology was, this is easy for me. It must not be something that's really worthwhile. If it's easy, it's got to be hard, But that was the moment I changed everything and started doing things that became easy to me, and I started that really changed my life, and I started to really take off at that point.
I see.
And that's what I graduated with, a communications major and a philosophy minor. And the philosophy minor, man,
Yeah,
that stretched my brain all over the place. And I credit I credit my ability to think critically and deeply with my philosophy studies in college. That began that. And in my book that you mentioned, thank you, it's heavily philosophical.
I see.
If it's not, if you read it and you learn that I'm a philosophy minor, it's not a surprise.
I see. What I'm learning is Mr. Tyler was born in Evanston, and you end up growing up in the Midwest. But I'm guessing at certain point in your life, you meet the West African culture and fell
Mhm.
in love with drumming. How that came about?
How did that happen? That happened because after college ended in 1991, I forgot to mention I was in a band in college for a few years because I can still play some piano and sing.
What kind of band?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. We did some original work. It was guitar, bass, drum set, and keyboards. and I was the keyboardist and the primary vocalist. And we did some original stuff, but some of the cover tunes we did a lot of cover tunes. We did some Pink Floyd, we did some Joe Jackson, we did some REM, we did some TV themes. You know, we did some really interesting music. We didn't do crap music, I'm glad to say. A lot of the people that saw us play didn't know the music that we were doing, even if it was covers, but they liked it a lot because it was interesting. So that's the kind of band I was in. Now, that's relevant because after college ended in 1991, I took some jobs here and there, and it's hard for me to even remember what happened between 91 and 94. Because 94 happened, I wanted to get back into theater, and I talked to my friend, Steve Meyer, who in college he was the roommate of the bass player in my band, and he would sometimes be asked to do sound for our band, all right? And I suggested to him, I got to know him good as a friend, and I suggested to him that, I think theater would be good for you, man. I think theater would be a really good thing for you. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, man. And he quit school and went to Chicago and went to Columbia College and got a theater degree from Columbia College like that. Now, that's relevant because in 94, when I wanted to get back into a theater again, I called him because he is into theater in Chicago, right? So he turned me on to an audition. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'll get back into theater. I really love doing theater. I love acting. I love the people involved. I love the whole thing. And when I would audition for plays in high school, from the first time I ever auditioned, I got a role. Every play for 3 years, I had a role. And I'm talking, we didn't do like little plays. We did Shakespeare. We did, I don't know if you know Neil Simon, but he's a prominent American playwright and writer. We did real theater in high school. And so I had been used to really being in an audition. I do really well usually. Well, now it's 1994 and I haven't been in a play for, oh my God, I don't know how many years, like 6 or 7 years. I haven't been in a play. And I did the audition and I did okay. I did pretty good. But I saw someone else do the same audition for the same role, and he did so much better than me. He nailed it so much. I knew that I was like, okay, I just saw myself get beat. I saw it. You saw it. I saw it. I'll be seeing you guys. And I left, and they cast the other guy. Yeah. But a couple weeks later, they called me back to ask if I would like to help do the music for the play. And the reason they did that was because of my friend Steve, who had turned me on to the audition, who was my sound man in college, right, for the band. So he knew I had some musical background. So he said, yeah, why don't you have him do some music for the play? And said, okay. And I said, well, that's not something I've ever done. So if you're okay with that, I'm okay with giving it a shot. And they said, we're okay with that. Come on, give it a shot. So there were 3 of us, and none of us were percussionists. Well, let me say this. Two of them had music degrees, all right? And they could both play piano, and piano is officially a percussion instrument. I guess I had some skills with piano, but I was not a drummer at all. So what they set us 3 down and said, okay, it's got to be, the soundscape for the play has got to be percussion. It's got to be played live, nothing pre-recorded, something ethnic, like as if to say not from the United States type of thing, all right? That was the only direction we had. And we didn't have any instruments or anything. So the floor became an instrument, the wall became an instrument, people were donating, like little bongos that they had sitting under plants in their apartment, stuff like that. And then about a month into pre-production, someone mentioned a drum called a djembe. All right, say, hey, why don't we get a couple of djembes? We heard this some African drum and see how they, see if it's good for the soundscape. And I said, oh, okay. And as it turns out, I had a guy that could get things from all over the world. He was my former philosophy professor at university. I had taken half my minor from this guy, and he opened up a store that had stuff from all over the world, including djembes. So I remember that first day. Let me see. Got a djembe right here. I remember that first day that I saw a djembe from across the room. And I said, wow, this is a big African drum. I don't know djembe, but I see that thing and it's big and it's all made out of wood and it's hand carved and all that kind of thing. There we go. So I see this across the room.
Wow.
I'm like,
It's
wow.
a beautiful djembe.
Yeah, I was like, wow, and this particular djembe is so beautiful, right?
Yes. It is.
From Guinea, from your home country, my friend.
I see.
And I sat down at it, and this is exactly what happened. I sat down at it, and I started going like this. And then I said, oh yeah, I remember this. Which stopped me for a second. I'm like, what? You remember this? And this is a conversation happening here, you know. He's like, you remember this? What do you mean you remember this? What's that? What? And I said, I don't know. And I kept playing.
Okay.
And that's how it began.
Oh,
So
wow.
I felt like I had done it before. I had never seen it or touched it before. As a matter of fact, a month before that moment, almost to the day, Percussion de Guinea had come to Chicago, and I saw them play live. Some of the greatest djembe drummers in the world on stage at the Vic Theater in Chicago, and I saw this, and it didn't grab me. It didn't hook me. I saw it, and I was like, wow, that's like a wall of sound. I can't even hear what's really happening. Then a month later, this play takes me to djembe. It made me feel, and I learned a lot about about this, the detail of how djembe came into my life later from an African shaman named Dr. Malidoma Somé. But I can say that looking back on it, I didn't find djembe. It seems like djembe found me. Seems like djembe came looking for me and said, you know, here, we're going to put it right in front of your face, Percussion de Guinea, and then you'll come to djembe. And then I didn't take it, and they're like, oh, this Taylor guy, he's thick. What are we going to do? We're going to drop a djembe right in his hands. And then when he plugs in, that'll be it. I feel like that's what happened. You know, I feel like the ancestors were working in a way that brought me to djembe or djembe to me. You know, it's not like I was looking for it out of, you know, it's not like I was brought up in a household where they had this kind of thing or that was even musical. My household was not musical, you know. Nothing about my background made sense about how I came to djembe or how djembe came to me.
I see. I'm guessing during that production, you were assigned to play djembe.
That's what happened.
What was the name of the production? How it went? You
Yeah.
playing for the first time, being in contact with a djembe. How that relationship went, and how was the name of the play?
The name of the play was Light in the Village. Light in the Village. It was a play by John Clifford. And it was a play that was written around that time. The two directors of the play, Mike McAlay and Michael Stewart, they were theater students from Columbia University, Columbia College in Chicago. And they somehow knew about this play and really wanted to do it. And yes, when I started playing djembe, it was clear that I needed to be the person that was my role, you know? So we would have to be composing soundscapes that would go with the scenes and go with the mood of the scene and go with the intensity of the scene or the subtlety of the scene. There was a scene where there was lovemaking, you know, like, represented on stage. So I had to do some kind of nice, groovy lovemaking music. There were some terrible things that happened and we had to do some very harsh sounding, terrible sounding sounds. So, it was really, what was happening here was really dictated by what was happening there. And, djembe culture is all about the djembe following the dancer, or it's about the djembe serving the farmer, or it's about the djembe serving the initiation, or it's about djembe serving the fetisher. So this was automatic in the play that I was doing. It was doing the same thing automatically. I didn't know that that's what djembe traditionally was doing. But it was just, that's what was happening. The whole thing was just happening. It was almost like it was happening to me, and I was just kind of letting it flow through me and just following it. I don't feel like it was following me. I feel like it was following it.
I see. I'm guessing after the production, how was you may um, you may say you may say basically, well, I just used the djembe to fulfill a production,
Hmm.
and after that, after the production, some people may say, well, it's time for me to move on with
Mm.
another play, but I'm assuming it was not the case. You continue in your journey with drumming. So can you take us to the different path where that journey lead you at this moment?
Uh-huh. Oh,
Mm.
okay. So during the play, we would practice 6 days a week, and then on the seventh day, I would go out to the lakefront and drum. And I was drumming every day of the week for those first months of the play and everything like that. Then after the play, I kept on drumming like almost every day, and okay, that was 94. I started drumming. Um, that same year, I started recording my first CD after the play. One of my best friends from high school, one of our dreams was to have a recording studio, and so he got a degree in music from Northern Illinois University. His name's Chris Pavola, and we combined our finances and bought some studio equipment and started recording a CD. This was 1994, and it was done by 1995. So I was recording my first CD. I had not had any exposure to traditional djembe at that point. All right. In 1995, I met my first teachers. It was in August of 95. I met Michael Marcus, who was my first djembe teacher. He is the founder of Wula Drum, and he's in New York City, and I consider him a master drummer. Um, that 2 months, 3 months after that, I met my first African djembe teacher. That was Yaya Kabo from Senegal, West Africa.
So where did you
And
meet them? Mm.
okay, so
Your
I met
first teacher.
my Michael Marcus. I met him at the Midwest Drum and Dance Festival. I can't remember how I found out about the Midwest Drum and Dance Festival, but at that point, I was trying to do anything drumming related, and I heard about this drum and dance festival in Selma, Indiana, where it was a whole 4 or 5 days of djembe and dunun and dance. And I was like, wow, I gotta go to this.
Mm.
So that's where I met Michael Marcus. And the first day I met Michael Marcus, I played dununs for him for 12 hours.
Wow.
I played Doodoo for him for one class in the morning, a second class in the morning, in the afternoon, a dance class, a second dance class, then a rehearsal for the gig, and then the gig. That was 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. So
And
that's how I met Michael Marcus.
so that thing was in Indiana. So did you learn from him or you were just helping him out? Mm.
Right, right. I began learning from him at that point, and then we began bringing him to Chicago to do workshops. So I did learn some content from him. But when I met Yaya in November of 1994, I met him because I was doing, let me see, a guy named Paolo Mattioli who did the first VHS djembe instructional tapes in the mid 90s. He was Guitar Center had brought him in, the stores, Guitar Center stores. They had
Mm.
brought him in to do drum circles. And I went to his thing and was just, I was playing dununs for him in the drum circle, and I was doing a great job and whatever. And then after Paulo left, the manager at the time, his name is Felix, he said to me, he goes, "Hey, would you want to do one of these things?" I said, "You would let me do one of these things?" He said, "Let's do it." I said, "Let's do it." So I did a big drum circle at Guitar Center when it was on Belmont and Clark at the time. It's not there anymore. The Alley is there, that store. But during that workshop, I there was a person in the workshop named Jeff Bodoni, and he was an instrument maker from the Northwest in the United States. And when I say instrument maker, this guy would make koras, this guy would make balafons, this guy would make djembes. He was some crazy woodworking dude. And he said to me after the workshop, he goes, "Hey, are you looking for an African teacher?" And I go, "Wow, you mean there are Africans around that teach this?" "Yeah." And then he gave me some phone numbers, and one of the phone number was that is what led me to Yaya Cabo, and led me to what was called Africa House back in the day, 6950 South May. It was called Africa House because, well, Yaya came over with a group called Ballet de Salimbo du Senegal, and they came over in the early 90s and proceeded to defect because they showed up and their manager had taken all the money and left them in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
And there's a whole story of how they survived. But this house, 6950 South May, I don't even know how many were living in this house. But the first lesson Yaya and I had was in his basement, was in the basement of the house. And in the basement, there were clotheslines with sheets draped over them to make different living quarters,
I see.
you know, through the
Mm.
basement, And so we went to his little living quarter surrounded by sheets, and we had our first lesson together. And I had heard Yaya was putting together a performing group. And I went into that lesson with a motivation to impress Yaya so that I could be in this group. And I remember the first rhythm we learned was Yankari. It was, oh yeah. So I did all that, did the lesson, and at one point he walked away to get something to drink, and I was left down there, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna do some stuff." So I lit it up and talking about, I did, right?
Yeah.
And so Yaya came, and I stopped, and Yaya came down, kind of gave me a look, and then we continued with the lessons. And then at the end of the lesson, he asked me if I would be in his group, and I was very
Mm.
happy about that. So now I was in a professional group with an African, what I would call a master drummer, So I was going to his classes. I would take private lessons from him, and there was a class at Malcolm X College, a group class that we had created for him. So I was going to his classes and stuff, and we were doing gigs together. We never rehearsed once, and we did hundreds of gigs. And he said to me about playing dunun and djembe. He's like, "If you play dunun and djembe, you're gonna get hired twice as much." So I learned dundun like quick, 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 and suddenly I was always next to him playing dundun. And then sometimes he would make me play djembe. The first dance classes I ever played were at the South Shore Cultural Center. They were Kemosha Murphy's dance classes. It was me and Yaya playing for them. And that's when I learned how to play for dancers. And that's a whole nother education that I'm so thankful that I went through with Yaya. Because sometimes he would take the dunun sticks away from me and force me to play djembe. And then I had to give the signals for the dancers to change and not screw it up. And if I did screw it up, the dancer would give me a side eye and be like, and I'd be like, "Oh, sorry." And then I'd have to, see what they actually wanted. So it was a whole different discipline. But I learned so much about African sensibility from Yaya, about performing, about dance classes, about just how to be in the moment. And he, I mean, just him being an African like he was in how he saw the world was an education for me.
So can you, I know you learn a lot from Yaya. Can you give us a little insight on one specific things you learn by meeting Yaya?
hmm Well, I can say that, like all djembe masters that I encountered after him, he didn't see color. He didn't care that I was some, light skinned dude. Like a lot of other people that were African Americans on the South Side, they cared. They didn't like that I was there. And I learned about this after the fact. Now, yeah, we got less than a minute left on this call. So how about can we stop here and then pick it up at that question? Because
Yeah,
there's a lot I want to share with you. Okay.
uh, yes. So we picking it up at 4 if when next time?
Yeah, let's set another meeting and then we can get this the other half knocked out, okay?
Okay, Mr. Tyler, again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation and for joining me under the human right tree. And
You're welcome.
I look forward to having another conversation and learn more about your Djembe journey.